Federal employees are known for working long hours and facing big to-do lists, and many do their jobs extremely well.
But an investigation by the News 4 I-Team reveals a bad apple could be sitting in that next cubicle. As Scott MacFarlane reports, in a fast-growing number of cases, they're on the clock, but not exactly on the job.
Behind your computer at the office, no one over your shoulder. What's okay to click and what's not? And what if your employer is the taxpayer?
Hey, Mr. Kaplan?
Yes.
Like Samuel Kaplan. Inside his office at this federal facility in Chantilly, Kaplan says he used his work computer to open emails from his private account.
Do you regret doing that?
Oh, of course. Of course. I mean, it was the best way I could describe it is ridiculous for me to do that.
Included in those emails, sexually explicit images. He admits some were even of children.
But that doesn't sound rational, and that's what it is. It's irrational.
He'd later plead guilty to possession of child porn and served 3 years prison time through 2014. The News 4 I-Team was tipped that although such extreme cases are rare, we should investigate just how often some federal workers kill time on the job looking at adult pornography.
Using the Freedom of Information Act, we sought records from 12 major federal agencies, some of the largest government employers in D.C. and nationwide, asking only for their most egregious cases. Cases in which internal investigators were called in or in which the employee admitted hours of porn viewing a day. And we found more than 100 cases.
That's classified as fraud, waste, and abuse. They should be working on their projects.
Agencies do police their computer networks for this, says Craig Ulmer, an investigator with the Environmental Protection Agency Inspector General. The I-Team found at least 7 EPA employees have admitted to on-the-job porn surfing since 2014, including one at headquarters here in D.C. That worker admitted viewing porn 2 to 6 hours a day for years. The feds found 20,000 illicit images on his laptop.
2 to 6 hours a day?
2 to 6 hours a day. I'm just using their computer system.
Including for pornography?
Yes, sir.
And investigators found one worker at the Federal Railroad Administration headquarters in D.C. searched for porn 252 hours in 1 year, nearly 10 full days of work time in 2013. At the Justice Department, which prosecutes illegal pornography and time fraud by government workers, the I-Team found nearly 24 cases in just the past few years.
And what does that say to the person in the next cubicle?
Congressman Mark Meadows chairs the subcommittee which oversees the federal workforce and said the cases found by us are unacceptable.
That's the thing that your work has shown, is that this is not just an isolated incident at one particular agency. We're starting to find it across almost every agency.
And he said the problem will grow until federal agencies pass a sweeping zero-tolerance policy. One offense and you're gone. Though every agency the I-Team surveyed said such computer use is against agency rules and would result in discipline, several said penalties vary and could produce as little as a reprimand.
You could go from one agency to another, and some do a better job of policing it.
And the congressman has just introduced new law to make it illegal to search porn on the job in government offices.
Sometimes you lose track of who you are and where you are, and what's important and what's not important.
Samuel Kaplan says he should have known better. That Chantilly office in which he worked and was caught, he was on the job at a Virginia office of the FBI, showing some bad apples think they'll never fall. Scott MacFarlane, News 4 I-Team.
Tonight, we've got a News 4 I-Team investigation, a fight outside the Pentagon.
16 years after the 9/11 attacks, one important and symbolic part of the complex remains missing, despite pleas to the government to rebuild.
As Scott MacFarlane reports tonight, it's first responders who found themselves last in line inside the center of the American military.
We all remember where we were that day. Bill Tody remembers exactly what he saw.
All of these images won't ever leave me.
The wreckage of American Airlines Flight 77.
A scene of devastation.
Which torpedoed through walls so close to his desk.
I had friends that died in the Navy Command Center.
He keeps a piece of the wall and a plaque on his wall at home.
I was underneath the rubble in the Pentagon.
Dan Holridge remembers seeing the rescuers.
And the time is of the essence when you're in firefighting.
Among the first to respond to the 9/11 disaster, with the fire rescuers assigned to protect the Pentagon helipad. Their fire station, which happened to be near the site of the crash, was also destroyed.
It was greatly inspiring to see how everybody came together and at risk of their own lives.
In the years since, the Pentagon reopened so much of its complex and a glimmering memorial to the 184 killed. But a review by the News 4 I-Team found the Pentagon helipad fire station itself has yet to be rebuilt.
It feels like it's going to just fall apart one day.
And today it's little more than a set of temporary trailers.
They're subpar. It's a construction trailer that's been God knows how old.
The firefighters who work inside are not here 24/7. They also spend time at Fort Myer in Virginia. But they must be here outside the Pentagon for all landings at the helipad, including military VIPs, foreign dignitaries, and the president aboard Marine One. These firefighters are not permitted to speak with the I-Team, but the head of their union is.
We've gone 15 years with anniversary after anniversary, and we always preach we'll never forget, and I think we've been forgotten.
The News 4 I-Team wanted to know why the rebuilding is taking so long. And through a review of 6 years of Pentagon and congressional records, we found the answer: a combination of red tape and busted budgets. We found it took 10 years for the Defense Department and congressional leaders to agree on a plan for a new station and to line up the money. Records obtained by the I-Team show in 2011 the military formally estimated the cost to be $6.4 million. Then for 4 years, they tried to find a contractor for the job. And then a bigger problem. According to internal military records, their estimate wasn't even close.
The responses back far exceeded the funding we had.
It was going to cost a lot more than you thought.
It was going to cost a lot more than what we had funding for.
Which means Pentagon leaders had to scrap those plans and start over, including lobbying and negotiating with a new Congress. They hope to have a new proposal this year, but admit there's no timetable still for a new fire station.
How safe are trailers, really?
The federal records reviewed by the I-Team show the temporary trailers also fail to meet Army safety standards without sufficient space to store hoses and store fire gear. Jackson says the tight quarters slow firefighters if they have to move and respond with that rescue truck.
It definitely adds time to what we're trying to do.
The Pentagon says safety is not at risk, but admits the trailers are not a good long-term option.
And we are working through the process as much as possible, as quickly as possible.
9/11 survivors like Bill Tody say they hope the new station is online soon.
You can't wait 10, 15 minutes for emergency equipment to respond. You need to start responding immediately
before the next emergency call comes. At the Pentagon, Scott MacFarlane, News 4 I-Team.
It's a hidden crime, preying upon women as they walk around in public. You might have heard of upskirting, men snapping photos on their cell phones of women beneath their skirts or blouses.
An investigation by Scott MacFarlane and the News 4 I-Team reveals a sudden sharp spike in these cases and some very unexpected places where it's happening.
Would you know if it happened to you? On a crowded street or busy metro platform?
To be touched or to be photographed in a way that's creepy, yeah, it's extremely creepy.
Shelley LaBelle caught a man taking photos of her while sitting outside at a restaurant on a crowded street in Maryland.
You could say something to that person, but I think you just left with this creepy sort of feeling.
Police never caught or charged the guy. But in several other recent cases, they did. In August, they arrested an 18-year-old suspected of upskirting dozens of women, some at the Columbia Heights metro station. Months earlier, surveillance video shows a woman confront a suspected upskirter at a station in Arlington. Good Samaritans help police stop him.
Keep in mind that there's a lot of strangers around us.
Metro Transit Police Officer Aaron Cooper says it's a growing problem, especially in a transit system in which passengers are glued to their phones.
In the world that we live in today, it's very technology-based, and so we don't think about our surroundings as much, and we've lost that personal space that we have.
Court records in Virginia, D.C., and Maryland show a dramatic increase in cases of upskirting in just the past 3 years. Many are now charged as felonies. But this type of crime is not limited to streets or metro stations, but also stores. In Loudoun County, police busted a man at a Target. Were there any other videos you recorded of any other people?
Just keep going.
And in the case of Juan Pablo Cortez Santos, on the job, he pleaded guilty to taking lurid photos of a female coworker inside Building 8 of NASA Goddard in Greenbelt. Neither Santos nor his lawyer wanted to tell us if there were other photos. Does he have concern about himself? Does he have concern about being videotaped?
But Santos didn't use his phone to take the pictures. According to court filings, he used a camera disguised as a pen to do so. And we found other cases where men use technology to hide the pictures and cover up their crimes.
Police and forensics experts like Brian Dykstra of Atlantic Data Forensics say they're seeing hidden apps.
They're masquerading as another app. They're, masquerading as a calculator, and then simply moves those pictures to a different location.
Like this one, it looks like a calculator, but when you punch in a code, it actually takes you to a folder where photos could be stashed.
Older adults tend to be less tech savvy, so a calculator doesn't immediately come to mind to them as being a dangerous application on a phone.
Police acknowledge it's a challenge to stop upskirting. They rely heavily on tips from the women themselves. Metro Transit Police showed the I-Team how easily it can happen using a staffer and our producer.
She was very involved in her phone while she was going up the escalator.
Their advice, be aware of your surroundings, especially anyone hanging around for long periods of time, and stand sideways so you can see who's behind you better.
She can move her space, and if she couldn't move, she could turn and look at him, make him feel uncomfortable.
Shutting down the upskirter before he can act.
I'm not surprised that this has gotten worse. The technology's gotten better.
Meaning we all need to be better at spotting the creep before he spies his next victim. Scott MacFarlane, News 4 I-Team.
Not only did the U.S. House Oversight Committee formally consider a new law to beef up the penalties for watching porn on the job in government offices, they passed it unanimously in just minutes.
Leaders of the U.S. House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, who have jurisdiction over the federal workforce, saw our report last week and took action.
I would also like to acknowledge the great reporting of Mr. MacFarlane. As the NBC Washington report notes, penalties for using government property to assess sexually explicit material vary from agency to agency.
And now our report has captured the attention of Congress. The top-ranking Democrat on the U.S. House subcommittee overseeing military construction projects says she'll support funding for a new station as soon as it can be built.
15 years is far too long to wait to make sure that our first responders are in facilities that are top of the line, state of the art, and I wouldn't call a trailer either of those things.
Key Virginia legislators representing the Pentagon community say they'd formally support new funding as soon as the Pentagon could hand over a formal plan.
They're working out of trailers. I've heard that the doors are falling off and the ceiling tiles are falling down. That's not the way we want to treat first responders.
This is an area where you ought to be able to get an appropriation for an important project.
Congressional staffers tell the I-Team that the U.S. House Appropriations Committee that would certainly be the panel to give formal approval for this project. They will meet to talk about military construction by late July. Doreen and Jim.
All right, let's hope they get it.
Keep you
Scott,
posted.
thanks so much. We know you will.
Thank you, Scott.